I'm Mishwa Lee, and I'm a retired SFUSD teacher, and I still currently work as a day-to-day substitute in the district, and I also live in Bayview Hunters Point, so this topic is of concern to me. Especially, I am concerned about the potential for more schools at Treasure Island. I think there are already schools there. I hope they're not still there, but it was probably 2000, and Treasure Island was being reopened with great fanfare. There was boats going over from the side of the bay. There was all kinds of musicians. There was many venues on the island, and I went to the Labor Solidarity music and picnic that was happening on the island that day. I went with my son, my godson, and my companion. And it was a beautiful day. It was warm. There was great music. I was dancing. I kicked my shoes off. I, had my shorts on. I was sweating. It felt great. And then all of a sudden, I got up to get some more food, and I kind of started to get nauseous. So I sat down, and within a short while, I sat up right on the ground. I think it was an old baseball field that the venue was at. Sat on the ground and, tried to gain my composure, and I got weaker and weaker to the point where I could not even sit up. And then the day progressed. I went and told my son and godson, you guys, you got to go find a medic, because I feel really like I can't get back to the boat. So they went and they got a medic, and the medics came and they took my pulse, which was extremely low. They started giving me something intravenously, and they said, we got to get you to the emergency room. So I got them rides somehow or other. Oh, my companion just happened to come back, and anyhow, they got off. I went in the ambulance. I went to General, and when I got to General, I was still feeling really horrible. And somebody came, one of the residents came and said, you might need to have a pacemaker. Your pulse is really low. And I'm like, what the? Well, I threw up, went to the bathroom, right there on the bedpan in the emergency room. I felt horrible, but I got better. They kept me overnight and did some tests and couldn't really figure out anything, and so I was released. It wasn't till sometime later, maybe even a year later, I happened to be talking with a friend from New Mexico. And I, just had explained what happened. She said, that's chemical poisoning. She said, that happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me somewhere in New Mexico. And she said, it turned out it was chemical poisoning. You were chemically poisoned. There must be poisons out on that place. And I knew, that it was a Superfund site. It wasn't properly cleaned up. It still wasn't cleaned up. And of course, by that time I was so focused on just trying to get through my teaching duties and my single parent duties that I didn't really pursue it. But I truly believe that I was chemically poisoned, and that probably a lot of that poison is still out there. And I live in Bayview Hunters Point. I know that Tetra Tech was responsible for falsifying records. I think there's whistleblowers that have testified to it. There are some people that are even in prison for this. I doubt if it's the CEOs of Tetra Tech, and somehow all these different agencies in San Francisco have permitted this, and it is shocking and disturbing. And to think that they would locate another charter school out there when it hasn't sufficiently been cleaned up. What are we doing to our children? This is abominable. Children, and what about the people that are living there now? And there must be documentation somewhere about all the people that have been on Treasure Island that have health problems that are similar to what happened to me. And I think somebody could put it together and show that there is a very high rate of health hazards.
What does it say about people who, knowing that there are serious concerns about radioactive material, toxins, that they would put children in a charter school at the old Treasure Island Elementary School?
Those people have mental health issues, and they really need to have some therapy to help them get in touch with what they are really doing to the children, to all the people that, are subjected to this. And it's not just here, it is all over this country. And wherever the U.S. military has been, it is a disaster, a total disaster. People are dying from this. And children, their health is impaired. How can we allow this? What is the matter? So, yeah, there's some serious mental health issues among people that are in power that allow this to happen and are aware of it. It's hard to fathom.
Hi, my name is Sarah Glanville, and I have my own interest in this issue. I too am aware of the military legacy at Hunters Point Naval Base, and I'm a native San Franciscan. But I came here to read a statement on behalf of 2018 San Francisco mayoral candidate and small business owner Michelle Bravo. And she wanted to say charter schools are essentially non-profit private operations, which are similar to the non-profit San Francisco Treasure Island Development Agency. Both have loose regulations regarding public accountability, which has been noted in the press many times over the years. Many charters are exempt from laws and regulations affecting other public schools. This is due to the privatization of our educational system, in which a public service is taken over by a private business whose highest goal is profit. The buildings in which charter schools operate are generally owned by private landlords, like TIDA. Accordingly, the private companies that fund and direct charter schools attract real estate investors who are looking to develop new schools or other buildings around them. Under California Proposition 39, funded and written by Netflix billionaire Reed Hastings, charter schools are exempted from the Field Act, which prevents public schools from being built in toxic dumps or Superfund sites, which is what Treasure Island is. At the March 2018 Treasure Island Restoration Advisory Board meeting, remediation project manager Dave Clark recollected that between 2006 and 2016, the Navy unearthed 1,280 radiological objects, one for every 2 residents. SFUSD Superintendent Vincent Matthews, London Breed, Willie Brown, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, and Gavin Newsom know that Treasure Island is a nuclear waste dump, which is extremely toxic and should be torn down, and that all human beings should be removed from there permanently. To place school children, faculty, volunteers, and families, most of whom come from working class and poor backgrounds, in an environment that may have long-term, serious health consequences is appalling and dangerous. Residents of SFTIDA are seeking $2 billion from the city of San Francisco in a lawsuit due to health issues arising from the contamination that is present on Treasure Island. Do not create additional lawsuits in the near future for yourselves, and especially for San Francisco taxpayers. Thank you.
I'm Eric Brooks. I coordinate a San Francisco nonprofit called Our City San Francisco that spun off of the Matt Gonzalez for Mayor campaign in 2003 to go after and solve problems of clean energy and consumer protection, environmental and economic justice, and clean energy, things like that.
And we're here today at City Hall, San Francisco City Hall, and the TIDA, Treasure Island Development Authority, which was set up by Willie Brown, to develop Treasure Island is now going to be having a vote on having a charter school on the old Treasure Island Elementary School. Do you have any concerns about that and the whole development project of Treasure Island?
Well, Treasure Island Development Authority was not only set up by the very corrupt Willie Brown, who's basically still the mayor of San Francisco after decades when he was first elected in the early 2000s, but also the federal government set this up. And it's been a long string of corruption ever since the very beginning to put corrupt agencies like TIDA in charge so that they can get sweetheart deals for Wall Street corporations like Lennar, so they can pretend they're going to build high-value condos on toxic waste dumps like Bayview Hunters Point and Shipyard and also Treasure Island, and raise their stock value. So the idea, I mean, the reality is these are all part of a Superfund site. It's incredibly toxic and radioactive. Tetra, the corporation that was caught falsifying 90% of the cleanup records in the Bayview Hunters Point shipyard development, also since the late 80s has done extensive cleanup testing and work on Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island as well. And that just screams to us that we need to go through the same process that we're currently going through with Treasure Island, on Treasure Island, where every single soil test, every single cleanup action has to be re-scrutinized to make sure that it wasn't falsified. And my guess is it was falsified, and there was evidence back in 2011, 2012 that not only Tetra Tech but Shaw Environmental was involved in covering up, joining with the Navy to cover up radioactive contaminants on Treasure Island. So we've got this situation where there are headlines in the paper every week about how Treasure Island and Bayview Hunters Point are very likely implicated in this corruption scandal with the testing, and that they've got, and we've known for decades, since I started this 12 years ago, and since many other groups and organizers started this even longer before that, we've known that this was all a cover-up and that there's radioactive and toxic waste on both locations. It's been in the papers right, left, and center for 2 decades now, and we know that it's toxic and radioactive, and the idea that we're going to put children out on Treasure Island to go to school, and the idea that the shocking fact that we've already done so is just an outrage. It's ridiculous. Anyone that is involved in this is either corrupt or needs to have their head examined.
And this corruption scandal now enveloping San Francisco with the arrest of Mohammed Nuru, who was the head of the Department of Public Works. There was corruption involved in the election with Gavin Newsom, the governor, present governor, against Matt Gonzalez. What was that? How was that corruption involved?
Well, I mean, what all this stuff boils down to is real estate corruption. If you look at the charges against Nuru, the most important one is him trying to fix a deal for a big Chinese real estate developer, the biggest Chinese real estate developer. So Nuru's thick with this kind of stuff. And Willie Brown has been thick with the Bayview Hunters Point real estate corruption ever since the beginning.
He was getting visas?
Yeah, getting visas for Chinese citizens to come and live in the United States, and the payback was that they bought property on these development sites, and it was a way to keep the development sites being developed even while we're discovering there's radioactive and toxic waste. So with specific regard to TIDA, it is crystal clear to anybody that really pays attention to this situation that TIDA is completely corrupt, that they have greased the skids for bad real estate development on toxic and radioactive waste on Treasure Island and toxic waste on Yerba Buena Island, because there's toxic waste there. There are underground storage tanks of petrochemicals and fuel lines for petrochemicals on Yerba Buena Island, so it's not separate. And literally, just to give you an example of how corrupt the situation is, as I said, Tetra Tech did testing work on Treasure Island for decades, and only recently, I think it was around 2016, as the Tetra Tech scandal started to break, did the Treasure Island Development Authority, TIDA, finally change the contract with Tetra Tech, change the contract with Tetra Tech so that they weren't really employing them to do cleanup work, even though the entire 2 decades before 2016, or 2 or 3 decades before 2016, they had done that kind of cleanup work. And Bob Beck, the director of TIDA, when we were starting to raise the concerns with all the supervisors about this problem a couple of years ago, Bob Beck went around to all the supervisors in this building in San Francisco, in the home of our democracy in San Francisco, and lied to all the Board of Supervisors and their aides, saying that Tetra Tech did not have anything to do with the cleanup on Treasure Island. He just openly lied with a lie that's so ridiculous and blatant that a grade school child could prove that it's false. And the fact that Bob Beck is doing that is an outrage, and he's probably going to continue to do it. He continues to repeat, everything's okay, everything's safe. The Navy says that. Then the corrupt Department of Health Environment staffer, Amy Brunell, continues to say everything's safe in the Bayview Hunters Point.
She's paid for by Lennar, apparently?
Yeah, she gets, her pay comes from the real estate development monies that are involved in this.
Do you think Mayor London Breed knows about this?
Oh, it would just be speculation, but it would be, if she doesn't know about it.
It's been in the Chronicle on the front page.
If she doesn't know about it, she's the mayor and it's her job to know about it. So I hope that she gets on top of it. If she's not aware that Amy Brunell should be removed from the Department of Health. So all this corruption is involved. And what strikes me is that people like Amy Brunell and Bob Beck, who continue to get up and just tell ridiculous lies for real estate developers in the Navy that are literally getting people sick and killed in the Bayview Hunters Point and Treasure Island, they need to start reading the papers about people like Mohammed Nuru, reading the papers about the fact that for the first time in history, we've elected a radical district attorney, a radical left district attorney, and we've elected a supermajority board of supervisors that's progressive. And that clearly San Francisco is not going to tolerate this kind of real estate corruption.
Well, why hasn't the district attorney spoken out? Why hasn't there been an investigation by the district attorney of this systemic corruption in San Francisco?
Well, the new district attorney that I'm so excited about just got in office.
I think he should set up a special unit for corruption of the city and county of San Francisco?
Yeah, I would imagine he's already done so.
Well, it hasn't been announced.
Yeah, well, I would guess that he's going to go after this stuff. He's made clear in his election materials that he used for running for election, and made clear in his public statements that he's not going to just go after police misconduct and killing of black people and racial profiling. That he's also going to. He made very clear in many statements that he's going to go after corporate corruption in San Francisco and government corruption in San Francisco. So I would fully expect his office to go after this. And people like Bob Beck need to read the papers and look at the writing on the wall and think about the fact that they're going to be the next ones to be the headlines in the paper if they don't clean up their act and come clean on this stuff and become whistleblowers about the corruption.
Well, it seems like they're part of it. The other issue is that there's some reporting that the plan is to develop a casino on Treasure Island. Do you think that may be part of the long-range plan of Willie Brown to have a casino on Treasure Island?
Well, I knew about the casino. I didn't know that it was scoped to be on Treasure Island, so I'd have to look into that. I wouldn't be surprised by such a thing. George Lucas was going to put some kind of theme park on Treasure Island until I think people got to him and said, George, Treasure Island is radioactive and toxic. You probably don't want to put your signature theme park on Treasure Island. And I think I'm just speculating, but I would guess that once he understood that, he backed out. But for companies like Lennar and Kenwood and the others, Darius Anderson, investors like Darius Anderson that are involved in Treasure Island and Bayview Hunters Point, they don't really have to care about the toxic and radioactive waste, because all they care about is, every 3 months showing value to stockholders in Wall Street. they could care less whether they actually end up building good condos or safe condos in those development areas. They just want to show stockholders that, oh yeah, we're going to build this and it's going to be a luxury development and it's going to be huge, and so buy our stock. But if you look at what's going on in the Bayview Hunters Point, the brakes are on that project. The people that actually live in the only condos that have been built there live in fairly low-income condos that were supposed to be high-end but are not, and they're all now thinking, should we sue and should we leave because it's radioactive and toxic here? So they're seeing the writing on the wall for themselves.
What does that say about the Democratic Party? Because you have Nancy Pelosi, whose cousin Lawrence Pelosi was with Lennar as a project developer for federal project. You have Dianne Feinstein, whose husband Richard Blum was involved in Lennar construction company, Perini, and is an investor in the development of Hunters Point and Treasure Island, and supported ballot initiatives for that purpose. And you have the Governor Newsom, who was involved as mayor, when whistleblowers were coming forward and there was no investigation prosecution. You have Kamala Harris, who was district attorney in San Francisco when this repression of and retaliation against whistleblowers was taking place. It seems like the whole Democratic Party of San Francisco, the leadership of the Democratic Party, is implicated in this corruption scandal.
Yeah, of course, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. The people that control the executive branch in San Francisco have always been corrupted by real estate. As I said before, Willie Brown got elected, I don't remember exactly the year, but it was either late 90s or early 2000s when he was elected, and ever since Willie Brown was elected way back in the day, he's been the mayor of San Francisco. And he's the one that's got, if you really look at all these real estate shenanigans, he's the spider at the center of the web. And, you know, every single mayor that we've had since Willie Brown has been someone who was groomed by Willie Brown. Mohamed Nuru, engaged in corruption to get the first protege, Gavin Newsom, elected as mayor of San Francisco. I mean, this stuff these people are thick as thieves with this, and it just shows that it doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. The point is, as we keep repeating, those of us that are on the radical left, the Democrat and Republican parties are both controlled by corporate interest, and the biggest corporate interest on the planet, is real estate. It's what's used to pump the global capitalist economy when it's going to fail. The global capitalist economy is it's over a quadrillion dollars now in financial instruments that are flying around the planet. Quadrillion with a Q. And it's like fake money, it's like monopoly money. It's not real money. It's inflating the economy to ridiculous degrees, and the fact that real estate is what pumps that is what's making it so that there's constant luxury development in San Francisco when we've already got a surplus of luxury housing of something like 140%, and there are empty buildings, and we keep building the stuff that people aren't moving into because it's a money pump for global capitalism to keep it from collapsing, to keep that quadrillion-dollar bubble from collapsing. So that's the deep economic story behind this, is that every city on the planet that's a major city is going through this same exact problem. And we've got to get a handle on it, and especially in places like Treasure Island and Bayview Hunters Point, that's where it's the most obvious. You know, not only have we got this weird capitalist real estate money pump that's ruining the planet, gentrifying cities, shoving poor people out of cities so that they can't afford to live because of all the luxury developments raising the price of housing in all neighborhoods in the city. All that stuff, you add that with toxic and radioactive waste, it should be a no-brainer that we can at least stop this nonsense in the Bayview Hunters Point and on Treasure Island.